Coming up next, it's the news headline show that goes behind the headlines and beyond belief. HBO's exclusive series, Night Wrap. Next on HBO.
Coming up, CBS News trades credibility for cleavage. Dr. Timothy Leary on drugs. Plus, more shocking secrets from the Kennedy compound. All this and more tonight on Night Wrap. Standing by in our New York studio is former Mayor Ed Koch. In a moment, his incredible reaction to the Japanese bid to buy New York. Tonight on Night Wrap. And now here is senior correspondent Joe Michaels.
Good evening. This is Night Wrap, the center of controversy on the cutting edge of credibility. Cities across America are facing financial disaster. Nowhere is the situation more critical than in New York. Mayor David Dinkins has announced that without a sudden gigantic increase in revenue, 20,000 city employees will be without jobs. Zoos and museums will close, and 1/4 of all the streetlights in New York will go out for good. Tonight on Night Wrap, we will meet Mr. Toshiro Ito, a representative of a group of Japanese businessmen who propose to buy the combined assets of the municipality of New York and save the city from bankruptcy. And we'll meet Tom Stoller, a former junk bond broker who engineered this history-making deal. We will also speak to former mayor of New York, Edward I. Koch, and Mr. Joseph D'Agostino, the comptroller of zoos from the Department of Parks and Recreation, who may be out of a job depending on what happens in the next few weeks. Gentlemen, welcome to Night Wrap. Mr. Ito, let me start with you by simply asking the question, why New York?
Well, Joe, it's primarily to protect our own investments. You see, we already own a great deal of property in New York. Several midtown hotels, soon the Empire State Building, and a lot more that you don't know about. So we don't want the city to go down the drain. It would cost us billions.
Mr. Stoller, you put together this deal. Can you give us a general outline of the mechanics of the deal?
Well, yes. Pending review of the State Financial Control Board, of course, the Municipal Assistance Agency will be acquired by the Satoshi Bank of Tokyo, who will buy $50 billion worth of outstanding city bonds, thereby clearing out the city's debt altogether. This will give them controlling interest in operating the city, as well as assuming the possession of all municipal properties.
Could you put it in layman's terms for the viewers?
Oh, it's kind of like refinancing the Mercedes. You see, all the public works, the transportation, sanitation, the zoos will be run by Mr. Ito and his associates. It's simple.
Now, why can't they just buy Hawaii? I mean, it's closer to them anyway.
Let's hold off for 1 second, Mr. D'Agostino. We'll get to you, but I want to ask Mr. Ito, sir, this makes you a very powerful man. You're holding the papers on a very large Mercedes. What do you plan to do with the city of New York?
Well, we plan to keep it fairly simple. We're not going to make too many changes. Here's a chart of the current city government. What we will do is have a new Japanese comptroller, of course, new borough presidents of the borough. The mayor will remain the same, except that he will have a different capacity, sort of like Joel Lewis in Las Vegas, Caesar's Palace, you know, a greeter.
Let me move over to Mr. Koch here. Mayor Koch, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I believe it will be an improvement on Mayor Dinkins. I do believe that the Japanese could do for New York City what they did for Bataan.
Hey, whatever happened to New York is for New York, okay? Why don't we all get together and save our city ourselves? I mean, where's Dave Beam when we need him?
There is nothing wrong with the Japanese whose children already live in New York City, coming in large numbers and buying up more property. They've already taken over Rockefeller Center and the New York telephone building. And David Dinkins, our mayor, is going to close the Central Park Zoo. And
Let me tell you that I'm looking around our studio and finding shocked faces. People are stunned here to hear you come out in favor of selling New York to the Japanese, sir.
I'd hate to see this city turn into a congested, dirty, filthy city. What if the French were interested in buying us? They'd put a pissoir in every single corner, and while they were eating those bloated sauces, they'd be whining as they always do.
Not a pretty picture for New York sidewalk cafes, right, Mr. Mayor?
You know, there are choices. We didn't sell New York City to David Dinkins. He just took it by storm, and we now want to see, having seen what he's done, what someone who buys it and therefore will cherish it because it's their property will do. And in addition, I think they will bring the hot baths that Tokyo is so famous for. They'll bring them to New York City, and we could use a bath or two.
Well, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned the zoos. Let me go over to Mr. DiAugustino, who is the comptroller of zoos in the city of New York right now. Mr. DiAugustino, obviously you and many other New Yorkers very unhappy with the mayor's position. Your reaction?
The first thing I'd like to say is this has nothing to do with racism on my part, okay? We have nothing against any particular people of any nationality, in spite of the fact that they have a history of attacking innocent naval bases. Well, okay, this is an issue about a certain flavor that the city has, a smell. You take that away, and we become Seattle. This is a city of Americans. New York City is a city of Americans like the Irish, the Italian, the Jews, the Africans, the Poles. You know, not a bunch of foreigners. We don't want a bunch of foreigners moving in here.
Let me move to Mr. Ito, who I find very surprisingly, with his finger in his ear, listening to this and smiling. Mr.
Where
Ito,
is his finger?
He's holding his earpiece, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, that's
and
okay.
This is all very charming, and thank you, Eddie. What I find so interesting is that we have learned a lot in all these years, especially from you. But this is business. If Americans don't like it, well,
reversal of fortunes here notwithstanding, let's go to Mr. Stoller and talk about what the plans are for the city of New York. I believe you're bringing other enterprises from Japan into the city as well.
Oh, absolutely. The idea, actually got it from the Los Angeles Olympics, the idea of leasing out certain properties to the private sector to, for example, you'll have JVC present Central Park. Maybe you'll have the Mitsubishi Midtown Tunnel, things like that. But I might add, though, it's not just Japanese now, because it's going to be an enterprise. In fact, Mr. Ito doesn't even know this. I had a conversation today with Merv Griffin's people, and we think we're going to sublease Fire Island to him.
Why don't we sell out to the Russians while we're at it here?
All right, Ito, do not buy Fire Island. It'll choke you.
All right, a piece of advice from the mayor of New York. Mr. DiAugustino, we are watching three of our guests almost gang up on you really here. They're saying this is the best way to save New York, but sir, you have a plan, and if you could let us in on that.
My plan is take the money from education. We don't need education. Nobody goes to school anymore. I quit school after an 8th grade education. I still got a good government job. Then there's the artwork that we have at the museum. Sell those to the Japanese. You know, I don't want to see the best city, the greatest city in the world go down the tubes so we can keep control over Monet's water lilies. And there's a lot of money in this city, a lot of people sitting on a lot of cash. And I think that what we have to do is get them to stand up and spread some of it around. You know, Woody Allen lives here, Kitty Carlisle Hart lives here, Donald Trump. Okay?
You think these people will voluntarily give more money to the city, sir?
What we need to do is to shake down people like Beverly Sills, see what flies. Take a trip to the Dakota. Look up Lauren Bacall and Yoko Ono, and whoever happens to be living in Leonard Bernstein's apartment these days. You know, listen, I know we have to tighten our belts. I know that we have to make some sacrifices. Let's sell the animals for the hides, not the endangered species. And the ones that aren't so popular, just let them go.
Sir, you're saying sell them to other zoos?
No, I said let them go.
Go? Release them to the streets of New York?
Oh, I put them on a sidewalk. If they want to go on the streets, that's their business.
Mr. Ito, you're smiling again. We're looking at visions of art being sold off, of animals being released, education being dismantled. Why are you smiling continually, sir?
I always said that New York was my city, and now it soon will be.
Mr. Stoller, what about the program? We talked a little bit about marketing programs. What about tourism? What about advertising? You put together the entire package, as I understand.
Yes, we're absolutely going to obviously have a massive advertising campaign. The slogan will be, I have a yen for New York. We'll have the song, New York, New York. I think we're getting Peter Allen to be the spokesperson in his Lakes Diamond costume. It's going to be spectacular.
And everybody will have to learn to play chopsticks.
There you go. Mr. Mayor, let me come back to you for a moment, if I might, sir. You're taking a very strong pro-Japanese position here. You've been supporting Mr. Ito's position and Mr. Stoller's position. Do you see Mr. Stoller as a savior, first of all?
No, Mr. Stoller is what we refer to in Yiddish as a ganef. A beloved ganef means crook, but nice.
Well,
let's ask Mr. Stoller. Mr. Stoller, what are you making on this deal?
Well, Mr. Koch, I don't ask to see your paycheck. I don't know why you'd want to see
Well, but he's
mine.
not buying New York. He was simply running it for a time.
Well, I'm not buying or selling anything. I put two, you know, I'm kind of like a yenta. I put two people in the same room, let them talk. What they come up with is up to them, you know.
All right,
A yenta is 1,000 yens? What is it?
Well, we'll get into the vernacular later, Mr. Mayor, but I want to get back to you right now to ask you this question, sir. Very pro-Japanese here.
You are a traitor, Mayor Koch, and I am glad that I voted for Mayor Dinkins.
Listen, DiAugustino, I remember you when you used to hop the fence at Gracie Mansion and steal the figs at night. One of the nice things about not being there is that you're no longer in my face. Get out of my face.
All right, a hostile exchange here. Let's go to Mr. Ito, who is smiling through this. Mr. Ito.
This is just the attitude that we find so charming and colorful.
Mr. Koch, are you taking this strong position, sir, because you might be thinking about running for the mayor of New York again?
No, no, no. I will never run again. They threw me out. Everybody out there threw me out, and I'm never coming back because I have been crushed. And I simply believe now that you can't go home again. So
you are not willing to announce your candidacy here on Night Wrap?
No, neither on Night Wrap or daytime soap opera.
All right, we're running short on time, gentlemen, so I'm going to ask you to sum up, if you would. First of all, we'll ask Mr. Ito, who has been very gentlemanly and very quiet here through most of the interview, to give us your summation, please, sir.
Well, Joe, I'm sorry to see that Eddie won't be running for mayor. We do have a little bit of cash that we could help him with if you wanted to ask. But this reminds me of an ancient story I heard when I was a young man in Japan. It was about this little boy who helped this little tree grow and grow and grow. And then it was time for the little tree to help the boy through a terrible snowstorm. Thank you.
Mr. Ito, I believe that was The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, but it is a beautiful story nonetheless. Mr. Stoller, your summation, please.
Well, at the risk of doing a little backpatting, I think I put a heck of a deal here together because we have this rare opportunity to make real history here, to take government out of the hands of the government and put it in the hands of the private sector where it belongs and maybe even turn a buck.
Mayor Koch, your summation, please.
Well, I think that the broker learned all of his tactics from Ivan Boesky, and you know where he ended up. Secondly, I believe that we will come to love the Japanese in the same way that the Koreans do.
All right. And Mr. DiAugustino, your wrap-up, please.
Okay, let me lay this out here, okay? Two examples of Japanese mismanagement, okay? Hiroshima, Nagasaki, okay? I don't want that to happen here, and I'm afraid that it might.
Food for thought. Will the quality of life be improved if that term can be applied in the city of New York? We'll have to wait and see. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us here tonight on Night Wrap.
Sayonara.
Coming up, Dr. Timothy Leary expands on drugs. And did the Kennedys kick off a clam bake with a human sacrifice? But now, is CBS News programmed for a fall?
The news media has come under heavy fire in recent weeks by critics who claim television news has gone tabloid and has suffered a serious loss of integrity. Nowhere is this issue more controversial than at CBS, where the very survival of the news itself is in question. Last month, the news division hired former MTV V.J. Nina Blackwood to join Dan Rather as co-anchor. This decision has outraged many CBS stockholders who are urging the network to abandon the news operation entirely. The issue goes to a stockholder vote next week. Our guests on Night Wrap are Nina Blackwood, who will be speaking on behalf of Dan Rather and the rest of the news division, and Mr. Marvin Thurman, who represents those outraged stockholders. Welcome to both of you. Mr. Thurman coming from our studios in New York City, and Miss Blackwood coming to us from Hollywood. First, let me say, Nina, you look wonderful.
Thanks, Joe.
Nina, you've been chosen to defend CBS really here in this position. You've been chosen as their co-anchor with Dan Rather. How did this come about?
Well, Joe, actually, I come from news. That is the heart that beats in me. Barbara Walters, Jane Pauley, they were all idols of mine. When I was a little kid, I remember Baba Wawa. And, you know, I've won several journalistic awards starting in third grade with the Weekly Reader, and I haven't stopped since.
Nina, how is Dan responding to all this? Dan Rather is a staple at CBS News. How is he reacting to you?
Well, Dan is a real babe, actually. You know, he's a little hard to read. He doesn't exactly you know, wear his heart on his sleeve. He sort of, you know, plays his cards close to his chest, you know what I mean? But, you know, I think it's going to be all right. Leslie and Chuck have been really great to me. I mean, they gave me this awesome dressing room. I've got my own wicker furniture. I've got a stereo.
All right, well, before we get too much into the position you have over there, I want to point out that the position is not a lock, as they say in the business, until the stockholders vote next week. And the stockholder we're interviewing tonight, Mr. Marvin Thurman, may put a stop to this job. What do you have against Nina Blackwood, co-anchoring the CBS Evening News?
Well, basically, we've decided that the entire news division is just not going to make us money, and we want to pull the plug on it. We want to stop pouring good money after bad and just disband the entire news division.
Dismantle the entire CBS News operation and replace it with what?
We've got 30 years of great news in the can already. We've got Edward R. Murrow, Walter Cronkite. We believe that we'll take the news off and replace it with our classic news.
These are news reruns, then, in essence.
You could call it that, yes.
What's wrong? Nina, what's wrong with this picture?
Well, this kind of mentality that this dude Thurman has, I mean, with keeping like a 50s refrigerator in everybody's living room is just not happening.
Mr. Thurman, I have to agree with Nina here. This is a rather radical position. How did you arrive at this position?
Well, it was not by chance. We commissioned a study on the matter and decided from the study that for us to be in first place in news, it would take 5 years and $300 million. We think it's a bad idea to go on.
You're urging stockholders to abandon the CBS News division entirely. Is that correct?
If people want to watch the news, they can watch CNN. It's not going to make money for us. They can read the newspaper. There's word of mouth.
I'd like to ask him what demographics that they did their research in. They certainly did not do research with the demographics that spend the money.
Well, the people that we saw in the demographics were not your people, Miss Blackwood. They were older people. They were the war babies, the 75 million strong that we're going to stick with and their money all the way to the grave.
The point is, Mr. Thurman, Joe, if you don't mind me interjecting here, I mean, you're talking the bottom line is finances, right? What I'm talking about is bringing the news into the 90s, speaking the language of the people, and marketing and merchandising, exactly what the 90s are all about. I'm talking about T-shirts. I'm also talking about, you want to talk about old news, we can sell videos from yesterday's news, at least not going back decades.
Well, Mr. Thurman...
Bumper stickers, I'd rather be with rather. Perfect.
Nina, I know you're real excited about the position, and I know that Mr. Thurman
I'm passionate about this. I'm half Italian. I can't help it.
T-shirts are not going to save CBS. I'm sorry.
Mr. Thurman, I have to kind of side here with Nina that although blatantly commercial, marketing is a way to promote news. It's been done before. Why not give her a chance?
No, you haven't heard me out here. Let me tell you some examples of our classic news. You'll see what I mean. There'll never be a slow news day. We've got the best of the news. On a Monday night, the Berlin Wall goes up. Tension builds throughout the week. On Friday, it comes down. Or on Monday night, Grace Kelly marries the Prince of Monaco. On Wednesday, she has kids. Friday, she's killed in a car accident. The space program will show people what a space program really was. They say people don't learn from history, Joe. Well, they will now with classic news.
Mr. Thurman, let me interject here, if I may, and make this point to you, sir. With Nina Blackwood on the CBS Evening News and current news, people would be aware that these events are happening now. With your news classics, people may think, for example, that we're at war with Germany. Should that be the show you decided to air that night? What would happen to people? Would it be like War of the Worlds, the radio program where people thought we were being invaded by Martians? How are you going to prevent this?
I mean, first of all, World War II wasn't even on TV.
If there were a war, one of the old... Well, let's look at the Vietnam War. If the Vietnam War were on the air and people were thinking, oh, God, we're going to lose the war. Well, they'd be right. But we'd get a chance to show them why we lost it, and it would never happen again.
Well, let's take a look at the new face of CBS News. We have Nina's audition tape here that got her the job as the CBS co-anchor. And watch your monitors, please, both in New York and Hollywood as we see this tape.
Winnie Mandela was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment for the kidnapping and beating of 4 young men in Soweto today. What a drag. And the new budget amendment bill, that took quite a beating in the House today in a vote that split along party lines. And speaking of parties, George Bush entertained Queen Elizabeth in a bash at the White House last night. That was awesome. It was quite a blowout trip. And speaking of trips, John Sununu is going to be traveling in a military jet, wow, to Augusta, Georgia for some golf. Not too far away from where REM's going to be kicking off its 12-city tour to promote their new album. And 2 lucky winners will fly on the CBS News jet to join them. Looks like the place to be. Back to you, Dan.
Nina, I must say, a visually arresting piece. I think I got some things subliminally there, and in fact, I really like the part how you worked in Sununu and REM Speedwagon.
No, it's REO Speedwagon, and it was REM.
Well, very interesting. Mr. Thurman, this seems like a different approach, a unique approach. Couldn't this possibly work at CBS? Couldn't you reconsider your position, sir?
Well, I have to say, first of all, that I have nothing against Miss Blackwood personally. I think she's kind of attractive, but I think she's unqualified, and, I mean, she's like one step away from Max Headroom. I mean, she's Maxine Headroom.
Wait a minute here. I resent everything that you said. Every single thing you said. I have integrity, and as far as Max Headroom goes, I mean, technologically speaking, he costs so much more than I do. I put on my own makeup, I dress myself, I do my own hair, and no offense to Dan, it's more than I could say for him, and I know he does need a little work in the makeup area.
If somebody is going to deliver the news, I want them to know what they're talking about. Well, I doubt if you could even find Biafra on a map, Miss Black.
Now, wait a minute, Mr. Thurman. Excuse me for a second. I just want to let him know that I was at Live Aid, I covered Live Aid, I was at Band Aid, I was at Farm Aid, I was in Montreux, Switzerland. I do know where Biafra is.
How do you respond to that, Mr. Thurman? Obviously, she knows her news.
I'm impressed.
Mr. Thurman, Dan Rather has been a staple at CBS News for years. What happened there? Why don't you feel he was able to save the ratings?
Dan Rather is a clown. We've given him 9 years. We've spent a lot of money on him. We gave him Walter Cronkite for a lead-in, and what have we got to show for it? We've got 9 years of cardigan sweaters and walking off the air and sobbing through news breaks and stupid sign-offs. No.
What about news integrity? Have you none?
Of course I have integrity. I mean, if the choice comes down to Walter Cronkite or Nina Blackwood, and I choose Walter Cronkite, what do you think?
Nina says she comes from news, and even if she didn't, sir, look at recent history. Henry Kissinger, a Nobel Prize winner, doing the weather on CBS this morning, although we didn't catch some of the cold fronts. He did an admirable job. Brian Gumbel comes from sports. Why not give Nina a chance here?
Did you really think Kissinger was admirable? We didn't.
Well,
none of the stockholders did.
It was his first time
We
out.
thought it was horribly embarrassing. We don't ever want that to happen again.
All right, if I can interject here now, let me ask both of you, because we're running short of time, to sum up your position. Mr. Thurman, your approach to the stockholders at the meeting coming up in 2 weeks.
No news is good news.
Unless they're classics, obviously. Miss Blackwood.
I believe in the news, Joe. The Vox Populi, which is Latin or Greek for voice of the people. I believe in integrity, I believe in Dan, I believe in passion and marketing.
Integrity and passion, many of the things we here at Night Wrap believe in as well. Thanks both of you tonight for joining us. Mr. Thurman from New York, Nina Blackwood from Hollywood. And once again, Nina, you look wonderful. Good luck. We'll see what happens at the stockholders meeting in 2 weeks.
And now a Night Wrap update.
On a recent edition of Night Wrap, we tackled the issue of drugs in the workplace. Now, with another point of view, is pioneering psychologist Dr. Timothy Leary. Dr. Leary, welcome to Night Wrap.
Glad to be here, Joe.
As I understand it, you object to the use of psychedelics in the workplace.
Yes, of course. Basically, I'm pro-choice on drugs for adults, but I am passionately against this notion that top executives should be taking LSD in their jobs.
And I understand in some of your research you have categorized drugs according to usage types.
Yes, there have been many hundreds of scientific studies. They basically show that there are 2 kinds of drugs. There are the Republican drugs and Democrat drugs.
Republican drugs and Democrat. Could you give us an example of what might be in each category? A Democratic drug, for example, is what?
The Republican drugs are the drugs that make you macho, they give you a hard line, you take charge, you're number one. These drugs, of course, are the drugs that became popular during the Bush-Reagan 80s. That's crack cocaine and steroids, and, of course, oil, which is the most addictive of all.
And a Democratic drug, if I can follow your logic?
Well, the Democratic drugs are drugs like LSD or marijuana. They kind of make you a layabout. You just love everybody. You're for peace, and you're a tree hugger. Basically, the scientific term for the Democratic drugs is you become kind of wimpy.
almost a Carter-esque type of a...
Jimmy Carter's the perfect example of, during Carter administration, they legalized marijuana in 14 states. Look at the picture of him.
What would happen if a Democrat took a Republican drug?
Yeah, terrible things happen if Democrats take Republican drugs. The worst recent example is poor Teddy Kennedy. Now, here's a liberal guy, and he's carousing around late at night in bar rooms, drinking and picking up ladies. I mean, that's the Texas stuff. You know, liberals aren't supposed to do that.
All right, and to continue the logic here, sir, of your presentation, a Republican on Democratic drugs.
Well, I can give you an extremely tragic case of Ronald Reagan. We just found out in Kitty Kelly's book that Ronald Reagan was smoking marijuana when he was governor of California. That explains everything. Like the amnesia, the forgetfulness, what Iran scam, the cheerfulness when everything's going wrong about him, you know, the national deficit, hi folks, hi, you know, the long naps after lunch, tragic case of a Republican, a hardliner taking a whip drug.
All right, sir, and you also came on Night Wrap to warn about the dangers of psychedelic drugs in the workplace.
Yes, specifically talking to the Republicans in the audience, stay away from psychedelic drugs because there are 3 dangerous side effects. The first is long-term memory gain. You just see the whole picture, but too much of it. The second is short-term memory loss. And the third, oh, I forget the third, but that's not important. Know your drug.
Dr. Leary, thank you very much for being here on Night Wrap with us this evening.
Thank you, Joe.
Unfortunately, our program ran longer than originally scheduled, and we will be unable to bring you the shocking Kennedy expose story. However, thank you for watching Night Wrap in its entirety. This has been Night Wrap, where we bring you the news as we see it, not as those in power see it or those in the ivory tower see it, but as we see it, so we can all see it for what it is, the way it is. Good night.